morning sun, how are you? Skies above. Gee, it's great to be alive and in love. Good. Good morning sun.
And good morning. Good Saturday morning to you. And today I'm actually semi on time. It is actually morning, and I do have coffee ready. This is going to be a little bit of a different episode. It won't be exclusively like BC content, but it will be BC related. And I would like to talk about the DynamicsCon Conference. So, let me just double check, make sure everything is working here. Yep, looks good. Okay, so what is the DynamicsCon Conference? It is a new conference hosted by Dynamics User Group, and it's given that things are a little different now. Physical conferences are still very difficult to put on, even those that were scheduled for the fall or even November, December timeframe. A lot of challenges trying to host those. So as everyone knows, virtual conferences are becoming more popular. Physical conferences are transitioning over to virtual, and new virtual conferences or gatherings are being set up. And so Dynamics User Group decided to host a new virtual conference from the ground up, virtual only, and they're going to be hosting content for several tracks. So there is the Power Platform track, Finance and Operations, Customer Engagement, and Business Central. So 4 different tracks of Dynamics 365 content. So if you haven't heard of the conference yet, or you haven't registered, if you're interested in Dynamics 365 content of any flavor, head over to the website. It's dynamicscon.com and click on the Register Now button. Very easy registration process, just your email and a password for the site. And the reason you'll want that is so that you can vote on sessions. And I really like this approach. As someone who has presented at conferences, and someone who's been on content committees and planning committees for conferences, one of the most challenging aspects of putting on a conference, even if it's one you've done for a couple of years, is coming up with new content. It's really hard to get feedback from the attendees or users prior to a conference. And I've even asked during sessions or during the conference for attendees feedback on what sessions they might want. And it's really hard for them to come up with a topic on the fly and know what they want. So what's nice about this is, I'm going to click over on sessions here. DynamicsCon asks for session submissions, and those are open through July 26th, I think. I think that's the right date, but it's still open for session submissions. And as these submissions come in, they are listed on the website as they're able to process them and get them posted. So you, as the attendee, are able to review those proposed sessions and vote on them. So for Business Central, for example, that's what I'm monitoring most closely. We currently have over 30 different session submissions that have already been listed on the website, and more will be coming. And once you register on the site, you can vote for up to 12 sessions. And I believe that is across all of the Dynamics 365 product lines. I haven't tried it yet, but my understanding is you have 12 votes and you can vote for the sessions you want. And so this is a great combination. The speakers or potential speakers can submit session ideas. You can review them to see what looks valuable to you, and you get to choose what content you want to see. Now, obviously, if you want to see an obscure topic and it doesn't get as many votes, that session may not get selected, but at least you can tell the conference organizers, hey, overall, as an audience, we are interested in these topics. And for instance, one of the difficult things as a conference organizer is, are we interested in end user content? Like the end user who is entering transactions and using the system on a day-to-day basis? Or are the attendees more high-level users or management or decision makers who are looking for overall features and functionality and pros and cons? Maybe they're looking to migrate from their existing ERP system to Business Central, and they want a more of a landscape view of, okay, how does this compare to my existing system, and should I invest in this new platform? Or are the users more functional? Are they more technical? Are they beginner? Are they advanced? It's really hard as speakers and conference organizers and people on the planning committee to know. So you get to make that choice now with the DynamicsCon voting system. So I think it's great. And so here, if you go to the site and you register, you can choose which Dynamics 365 product line you're interested in. And I'm going to click on Business Central here, and it lists some featured speakers. And these are just 4 speakers that were randomly pulled from the list, showing you, hey, AJ is going to be speaking, Tobias, Carrie Peters, Mary Thompson. And you may recognize some of these speakers, and some of these are new. I'm not familiar with some of these speakers, so this gives you a chance to say, hey, let's see what session Mary has submitted, and is that of interest to me? So, for instance, let's take a look at these. Eric or Waldo has submitted a few sessions here. Best practices in product development and customer customizations. So, sounds developer oriented, but kind of high level. It's not a code review. It's best practices for designing and developing your customizations or products for BC. And Kristen Hosman, a good friend, she has a lot of functional focus sessions. I think she did 4 session submissions. So this one is about processing EFT payments. And if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I have a gripe with US payment processing. We love, or businesses love, paper checks in the US. I still get checks via FedEx where customers have spent $90 to send me a paper check overnight via FedEx on a Saturday, and it blows my mind that that still occurs. So she is showing you how do you set up EFT payment processing in Business Central. So I think that's a great hands-on, practical, here is how you do it. Here's how you get that additional functionality out of Business Central to welcome to the 90s, right, in terms of payment processing. So I think that sounds like a great session, setting up data exchange definitions and processing EFT payments. So you're noticing very different types of sessions. So it'll be great to see how users vote and which types of sessions bubble up. And maybe this will spawn a couple different tracks. Maybe we need a BC functional, a BC technical track, because those are 2 very different audiences, right? If I'm a BC AL developer, do I want to see setting up EFT payments? Or if I'm an end user in the AP department trying to make my life easier and get the most out of the system, I don't want to sit through development sessions. I want hands-on functional sessions, right? Tobias has automating Azure DevOps, and that's something I'd love to see. It's currently a bit out of my reach. I'm still at the baby step level of learning AL development, but I absolutely know that when I do BC AL development, I need Azure DevOps. There's just no way around it. I do not want to be doing BC development without a DevOps pipeline. You are just punishing yourself if you don't have an automated build pipeline with CI, CD, automated testing. Just the changes are happening far too fast. So I can totally see if you're doing AL development, check out automating Azure DevOps. Really if you don't know about it, check it out. You need to be at least aware of it and starting to invest in it to make your life easy down the road. Okay, and here's a session by Cynthia Priebe. I don't hope I'm pronouncing that right. Priebe. But I think this is pretty cool. She is proposing 3 tools that users or teams can use: configuration templates, user tasks, and notifications, and learn how to use these features to make your business process in Business Central more effective and efficient, and set them up to begin using them tomorrow. And one thing that I think she could add to this, obviously time constrained, but I was looking at Business Central job queues recently, and I'm curious if Business Central job queues can be added to this list, if that is a viable way to make your life easier. I don't know if that makes the cut in terms of value, but I think this is pretty cool. I'm all about automation, improving, getting the most out of the system, improving efficiency. So I think that's a really neat session. Already has 9 votes, so I'm not alone in thinking that's interesting. Stefano has implementing serverless workflows for Business Central. And so create enterprise-ready workflows in the cloud for Business Central using, Power Automate, Azure Logic Apps, Azure Functions, and more. So this sounds like more of an advanced workflow. I know we have the out-of-the-box BC workflows that I believe uses internal BC functionality. And then I don't know the name of it yet. I need to refresh my memory what they call it. But and there was a blog post on this recently that I'll pull up that talked about how you can use Power Automate. So standard BC workflows, Power Automate enabled or Microsoft Flow enabled workflows, and it basically pushes the workflow process out to Power Automate. And it sounds like Stefano is doing a more advanced version of that can include Logic Apps and Azure Functions. And I'm all on board with that. I love the geeky technical stuff. This sounds to me like a more advanced session. So if you're running into limitations with the out-of-the-box Business Central workflows, or if you're starting to use the Power Automate or Flow-related workflows, this sounds like a good session if you're starting to push those limits and finding any limitations there. And another session by Kristen Hausman, using account schedule overviews in BC. And I think I know what account schedules are. So I believe that is the out-of-the-box reporting, financial reporting in Business Central. So use the account schedule overview, set up new column layouts to meet the needs of your organization. So financial reporting, it sounds like. I think that's a great session for hands-on using the financial reporting tool in Business Central. Very cool. And so, just looking at the votes, best practices in product development, dev-oriented, 16 votes, automating Azure DevOps, 14 votes. From what I've seen, Business Central often has a very developer-focused conference focus, so technical-oriented. So there are Directions NA, there's the Directions Europe, I believe, and then there are a couple other conferences. They tend to be technical developer oriented. So I'm not surprised to see the more technical focus, but I am very curious to see if we can get end users with the day-to-day data entry and system users, how much interest we have in this type of content over here with Kristen and Cynthia. And another session by Waldo, AL development design patterns. To me, that's an advanced development topic. But look at that, 17 votes. So definitely demand for that. A lot of the AL developers are interested in that. Using the right BC setup and support. Using the right BC setup to support different warehousing business requirements. So this is a very specific configuration and functional topic around warehousing. And I believe this one is new. So that may be why it hasn't received votes yet. So this is something you'll see. The sessions that were up early on the site have received some votes, and we need to encourage users to revisit the site before the conference, before after the sessions close, or before I guess the voting period closes, to revisit their votes, and feel free and reallocate your 12 votes. You can go back in, change your vote at any time. Get some coffee here. Okay, so if you're interested in warehousing, check out Jose's session. And Carrie, I don't know Carrie, but this is cool to see these sessions coming in. Accounting efficiency boosters in Business Central. Kind of reminds me of the automation tools. I'm all about efficiency and automation. Let's check that out. So accountants, great. Accountant focused. I love that in the session. You know, who is this for? Hey, accountants, looking to save time, reduce manual work, reduce errors and rework, share ways to increase efficiency in everyday accounting related processes in BC, how to use the full functionality. I think the last Power Platform share with Belinda and Mariano, I believe that I mentioned that actually maybe it was the BC versus GP that I had with Tanya and Gavin. One of the most common things we see as consultants when we work with customers is they're using this really advanced ERP system, but they're not using some of the most basic features that could make their life easier. So these sessions are very popular. Improve efficiency, use some of the existing system features. You get the most functionality and most value out of your existing system. You're already paying for it. Maybe there are just 2 or 3 or 4 features that you can use that'll save you an hour a week, 4 hours a week. So another great session. I think this would be a big hit with end users. And AJ, and advanced techniques with Business Central APIs. I attended AJ's online course for BC APIs. Fantastic course if you're looking to get into using the BC APIs. It is a little more technical focused, but it's a great overview of how you use them, how you access them, and how you can extend them and create your own custom APIs. So as he notes in the description, advanced techniques. So he has some great information on kind of tricks and hidden tips about using BC APIs that you really wouldn't know. Even reading the documentation, you may not know about this trick that can really save you some time or expand the functionality of the BC APIs. So I know several of these from his class, and I highly recommend attending this session if you've ever used or are interested in using APIs. Deep inserts, if you're inserting data into BC, great technique there. Batch calls and webhooks. Webhooks looks really cool. There are a few limitations and catches, so very cool content there. The state of Business Central on Docker. Yesterday, I just did a video on my trials and some of my recent trials and tribulations with Docker. And so Microsoft has made radical changes on how Business Central and Docker works. There are no longer specific images, and I believe that is referring to Freddy's new re-architecture with generic images and artifacts. And if you're not aware of that, a couple days ago, I did a video on Freddy's blog post and an overview of how those work. And I also did an update once I learned more about the artifact process and the named images. I did another update on that. And you can also check out my video from yesterday showing how you use the new BC container wizard to generate the script to use Nav Container Helper to create new Docker containers. So you'll want to make sense of artifacts if you want to use Business Central on Docker, absolutely. Just as Business Central is changing extremely rapidly, how Business Central uses Docker is changing daily. Freddy is completely re-architecting and improving the efficiency of the BC Docker images and containers. So daily changes to that. Like literally you may have an older version of Nav Container Helper, and every single day you need to update to the latest version and make sure you're not missing anything. And you need to check for new parameters or settings in Nav Container Helper that may expose new features. So I just discussed that yesterday in my last video. So if you want to use BC on Docker, this session will explain how everything plays together to get value. So absolutely, if you're a developer or if you want on-prem sandboxes to play with, definitely check this out. Lots of value here. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, another session by Kristen. Personalizing Business Central. This is a great feature set of BC. You can personalize so much of Business Central now. Even in the earlier releases, you could do personalization, but they've really improved the functionality of personalization, changing columns, changing page layouts, hiding fields you don't need. Your experience in Business Central can be highly tailored to what you do. And I guess on the downside as a consultant, if I were to see someone's customized Business Central page, I may have a hard time orienting around it because it could be so different than the out-of-the-box page. So a little bit challenging for us consultants and developers because we need to quickly review a page and reorient around what a user's done to customize it. But for the end user, great possibilities here for customizing and personalizing BC to really make your day-to-day usage more efficient. So this is a brief description, but I know there are probably at least a dozen different things you could do to highly tailor your Business Central experience. Okay, so budgeting in BC. In my experience, not too many customers use budgeting, but the customers that do use budgeting, at least in the GP world, they go all out and they really rely upon budgeting and do budget to actuals, pull them into financials. So this will be interesting to see what the interest is for this. Learn how to set up budgets in BC and perform basic reporting on budget versus actual. So more of the accountants and financial end users. Dynamics 365, Business Central, and Power BI from zero to BI Hero. So if you haven't heard of Power BI, it is an extremely popular tool, very, very popular in the 365 and Power Platform world. It's kind of its own product. It's not necessarily closely tied to Power Automate and Power Apps, but Power BI hugely popular in the Microsoft ecosystem. So interesting session on using it with Business Central. Super powerful. I've attended an intro session from Sean Dorward and also Rod O'Connor back in the day at the GP conferences, but this sounds interesting, learning how to use Power BI with Business Central. Hey, who's this guy? Steve Endo here. So I am new to Business Central, and I am a new Business Central developer, just trying to figure out what is this entirely new ecosystem. I used to develop with Dynamics GP and .NET, and Business Central is an entirely different animal. The application is completely different. The architecture is different. It's SaaS. It's not on-prem. I don't have access to SQL Server. AL is a completely new development tool, totally different in many respects than .NET. So I was starting from scratch, and it's a painful process. Like, where do I even begin? Now, I started this a couple years ago, but now there are more how to get started guides. Christoph has a great AL for beginners that is on my blog post, my BC resources blog post. But this is more the sympathetic session for the new BC AL developer who is deer in the headlights. How do I get started? So I just want to start from scratch, walking through the process. In a, say, 50-minute session, I don't know how much time we'll have in these sessions exactly, but it'll be less than an hour. I'm going to try to share, okay, how do you work with a Business Central container? How do you set up a development environment with VS Code and the extensions? And how do you use VS Code to create a new BC extension And where can I find more resources? Because I can't do a 4-hour lab. This is going to be less than 1 hour. So this is the crash course. What do I need to know to get started? What are the terms? What do I need to do? Where do I find more information? So this is oriented toward people who are brand new to BC development, or maybe you're coming from Nav and you come from the seaside world. It's probably just as disorienting to come over to the BC, Docker, VS Code, AL world and learn how to do things. So that's what this session is for. Okay. And next up, integrate Business Central with Power Automate. So I'm a huge fan of Power Automate. I have spoken at the Power Platform World Tour in Anaheim and San Diego. And one of the sessions that I did was how to use Power Automate to create, I did a couple of them. One was a custom web service in a couple minutes. And the power, no pun intended, the power of Power Automate for someone who is not a developer, it is crazy how quickly you can set up a really advanced integration with another system using Power Automate in just a few minutes. And it's very much a citizen developer tool. You can use Power Automate with literally zero code. I'd say in my experience, 99%, 100% of my Power Automate prototypes and demos were no code. Maybe I needed to understand SQL to connect to a database and look at tables, but very, very powerful tool. So AJ is going to show how to use, how to create a flow in Power Automate and select Business Central as a data source. And what are the possibilities, the limits of the standard connector, which you'll learn about that. What is a standard connector? That would be out-of-the-box connectors to BC. And how might you expand that? It looks like he's talking about approvals and exploring other scenarios like custom connectors. So very cool. Huge fan of Power Automate and using it to make your life easier. Lots of little tasks that you may not think of that you can do with Power Automate. And let me just open a different app in the background here to monitor the stream and see if any chat might be going on. Okay. Just check on things. Okay. So, what do we have next? And I'll speed things up to get through them. Another one by AJ, create custom central connectors for Business Central. And what is this about? How to use custom fields of Business Central in Power Apps or Power Automate. And this would be custom connectors. Got it. So if you need to get past the out-of-the-box connectors that only work with standard fields in Business Central, say you have custom fields or custom tables in Business Central, how do you connect with them? So sounds like AJ is going to take you to the next level. How do you get that custom data out of BC, or how do you interact with that data and those tables in BC? Kim Dallefeld, sorry, terrible pronunciations here. Training experienced Nav users on Business Central. Yes, I thought when I got into BC, I thought Nav users would have this huge advantage over former GP users in terms of migrating to BC. I attended a couple workshops and I kind of mixed feelings. On one hand, I was very relieved that Nav users were just as frustrated and lost as I was. On the other hand, I felt kind of bad because I think they might have been expecting an easier transition like I was, but they were a little confused, the ones that I saw. So I had some empathy. Trust me, I'm right there with you. For any user used to Nav, it's an abrupt change in the BC UI navigation convention. So yes, if you are a former Nav user or existing Nav on-prem user and you are having to transition to BC, great session for that audience. There are thousands of Nav users out there, kind of like GP users who are transitioning to BC. So great session from Kim on making that transition. Okay, and preparing your BC upgrade. Another one on, say you're on Nav or on-prem BC and you're looking to upgrade your BC. So a good session from Sarov about making that transition and upgrade. Next up, Tobias has interfaces in AL, and this is a new feature that was brought to the AL language, interfaces. Actually, no, I think I'm not sure if I'm confusing this with another, implementing and extending a sample interface-based solution. I'd have to go refresh my memory on interfaces. I think I know what that means, but if you're an AL programmer and you're super technical, you probably understand what that means. So Tobias is talking about that, what I think is that more advanced AL development feature. And again, the Steve guy, real world uses for the Business Central APIs for the non-developer. So I think people rightly may consider APIs as a programming thing, application programming interfaces, which is usually the case. But Business Central Web APIs, they're just a URL. So in this session, if anyone is kind of an end user, power user, a reporting user, just semi-technical and understands how to work with a URL and has some familiarity with the term JSON, I want to show those users how you can extract information out of Business Central and utilize the Business Central APIs and leverage them to use reporting tools, Excel, Power BI, any other reporting tool that can extract data from a web API URL. So that's what this session is about. No coding required. Okay. Integrate Business Central with Power Apps. When you create Power Apps, you select BC as a data source. And how do you work with those connectors to create a Power App based on BC data? Some really powerful stuff you can do in the Power Platform. Instead of writing a full-blown custom application within BC, maybe you want it mobile. Maybe you want it web-based, external from BC. Power Apps can do some really interesting things. Okay. Mary Thompson, bedazzled by Business Central, walkthrough of high-level overview of BC, show how easy it is to get started, how efficient it is for the SMB space. So those users or executives or people who are evaluating BC, just trying to understand what it's about, a great session to understand this. And so I'm curious, do we have those people who are looking to attend the conference to learn more about BC? This looks like a great session. And Carrie Peters. If you are not familiar with Carrie Peters from New View Strategies, Nav and BC genius. I attended one of her early training sessions on Business Central, and I don't even think the name Business Central had been assigned. It was some other, I forget the prior name, back when it was brand new. The product was changing so fast that in the middle of our training, features would stop working, menus would change, things would break, and she was having to adjust the training on the fly. But absolutely brilliant person and fantastic trainer, knows the product cold, and just one of the penultimate functional experts of Nav and BC. So if you want to hear a master trainer, presenter, and product expert speak, I can highly recommend any of her sessions. So 35 tips inside of Business Central to accomplish things faster. So that goes back to my utilizing the product, gaining efficiencies, and 13 votes, including mine. I totally support that session. I will learn a ton in that. Introduction to DevOps. So this is the second DevOps that we've seen. And so this would be the intro. So if you're not familiar with DevOps and you want to learn more about source control and how you use that with BC, great session. Highly recommended. As I said, DevOps is essential, I think, for any AL development. Just invest in it from day one. Otherwise, you'll have an immediate technical deficit and you'll be punishing yourself. And as soon as that 16.3, 16.4 rolls out and things break, you will understand why you need DevOps and an automated build pipeline and CI/CD and automated testing. Another session by Carrie Peters. Do you have the right dimensions and posting groups? And during the training with her, this was my #1 learning curve coming from GP. Dimensions, what does that even mean? It's an essential part of BC setup. In GP world, we have a kind of equivalent of GL account segments. BC uses a term called dimensions, a little bit different architecture. You need to know this if you're installing, configuring, implementing, or doing financial reporting out of Business Central. Auth authorization with Business Central APIs. Oh boy. So it is brave of AJ to tackle this topic. If you are using BC APIs, you can use the basic auth, but it is not recommended for several reasons. And AJ will probably cover that in this session. You really need to understand OAuth in order to properly use BC APIs and take it to the next level, especially if you are developing a product or an app against BC APIs. Essentially, you go the OAuth route, fully understand it, because there are some kind of gotchas and catches to implementing that and ways to implement it properly. I've done it a few times just for testing and prototyping, and it is not obvious. I had to follow a 3-page guide from Microsoft to get it, and I barely knew what I was doing. I got it working, but even after you get it working, there's some things that are just not very obvious when you're doing that. So if you're working with APIs in a serious manner and you are looking to do proper development, OAuth is definitely the way to go. So check out AJ's class. I learned a little bit about that in his APIs course. Okay, how to sync master data using Dynamics 365 BC with Power Automate. Another Power Automate session. So if you're having to sync your master data, say customers is my guess, master data. So customers, vendors, items. Maybe you have an e-commerce website and you're syncing customers and items. Maybe you have an external AP automation platform for bill payment. You could want to automate the sync of vendors. So interesting session, great use of Power Automate. Highly recommend it. Sounds great from Jose Miguel. Okay, another session by Stefano, Azure Functions for 365 BC developers. I am a huge flag-waving, card-carrying Azure Functions advocate. If you're a developer who has done web development, done custom web APIs, had to deal with IaaS deployments, Azure Functions is just super cool. I'd love to use them with a customer whenever possible. So I support any Azure Functions session. So an overview of Azure Functions and how to use them effectively or efficiently with Business Central. What are some use cases of integrations, tips and tricks for using functions when going to production? Awesome. I would love to see that session. And I think I've seen a couple other posts by Stefano, really advanced stuff. So huge fan of Azure Functions. Extending BC with the Power Platform. Very interesting. So I've had a few discussions about CDS, like CDS this, CDS that. It's like, okay, what in the world? And CDS is growing in popularity, especially in the context of Power Platform. And I recently attended the Birinar that Christoph, the BC Birinar session that Christoph hosted, where we saw a very cool demo of pushing BC data or syncing BC data over to CDS for a use case for reporting. And so I am still trying to understand, what is the use case for BC and CDS? Well, one of those I do know is Power Platform. If you can get your data into CDS, it makes it much easier to integrate with Power Platform, be it Power Automate, Power Apps, or Power BI. So maybe you're looking to do some advanced Power BI analytics and you want convenient access to your data. You can sync BC data, theoretically, take some work, but you can sync your BC data with CDS. And so discuss how BC works with CDS and see a demo of pulling a table into Power Platform and creating an easy app as a demo. I am very curious to see how Mary is doing that. How is she getting the BC data, table data in the Power Platform? Is it the way that Andri showed in the BC Birinar using AL? Or is she using a different technique like maybe Power Automate? Very curious. So I'm going to click that and vote for that session because I want to know. The whole CDS integration is kind of bugging me. What are the use cases for that? So I'm very curious to see how she's getting the data into CDS. Is it something an end user, power user can do, or does it require a developer? Very cool. Dynamics 365 Business Central and Teams with Power Platform. Interesting. Teams, we all know what Teams is, right? We'll show you how you can integrate Business Central and Teams. So I've heard of this, and apparently they're working to expose BC functionality in Teams. I don't know what that means. Like, do you view the BC webpage within Teams so you don't have to exit Teams, or is it like a more limited integration? So, with Power Platform tools such as Power Automate, Power BI, Power Apps, Manus BC data. Okay, so I don't know if this is exposing BC in Teams directly or pushing your BC data via Power Platform into Teams. So very interested. I am not a big Microsoft Teams user because I'm just Steve Endo. But I know a lot of people are using Teams more and more, especially with the work at home situation. So if you're into Teams, this is for you. Introducing source control management with VS Code. So just as Azure DevOps is essential, you need source code control, you need a repository, you need to understand code management and Git. This is a great session if you're new to VS Code, introduction to source control management with VS Code. So I believe Waldo's done a few polls on Twitter asking about this, and other people have discussed this. And in my experience, many Dynamics partners do not have a good strategy for managing their code. And if you're moving to the BC space, working with AL, doing any type of extension development, you absolutely need good source control along with all the other CI/CD and DevOps management. So you really need to invest in VS Code source control management and understand how that's done. I've been using Git for a few years with Visual Studio for my Dynamics GP.NET projects, and I would consider myself a beginner because as if you probably have used Git, it's really hard to be a Git expert. You can get some really complicated situations and get yourself into trouble. So I constantly have to refer to documentation on Git. So this is a great session. I need to know how to use that more competently. But I suspect there will be a dependency here on DevOps and your Azure environment. I've been using Git with Bitbucket still because it's just super simple. But I really need to learn how to use it with DevOps and get that process set up. And Sean Dorward. If you haven't seen Sean Dorward speak, his sessions are very popular at the user group summit sessions in North America, certainly on the GP side, also on the BC side. His life hack sessions are always standing room only, people flowing out the door. So his will be, I suspect, a fast-paced session with real-world tips and tricks and life hacks, as he calls them, to make things more efficient and to better utilize Business Central. So again, on the utilizing the features, getting the most out of the product, his session will always be great, very well attended. So no brainer there. If you're an end user and want to learn more about Business Central, Sean's session is always a great showing. So I voted for that. So that is the overview of the sessions available today as of July 11th. You need to go back to the site and revisit it later, I guess. And definitely, I think it's after July 26th is when the submission proposals are closing. So definitely, if you're interested in speaking, definitely get your sessions in to the DynamicsCon organizers before then. You can find them on Twitter. They're the DynamicsCon handle. And you can, I believe the process is to DM them or DM Molly Fuchel. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Molly. She is also on Twitter. You can DM her if you're interested in submitting sessions. And I believe it's Molly and another person, Abby. They are having to compile these, organize these, and get these submitted on the website. And they're very busy doing that. So consider they're doing all 4 product tracks, not just Business Central. So give them a couple days to respond to the email, check it out, and get it posted on the website. It does take a couple days for them to get through that process. But that is the overview of the DynamicsCon Conference Business Central track session. As of today, over 30 sessions. And if you just refresh this, you will see new speakers get rotated through. And hey, check out Belinda. There's Belinda in the Data Power Platform. She's obviously a Power BI expert. So, and I think Mariano has several sessions in here. There's Melissa Hubbard and there's Mariano. So just tons and tons, hundreds of sessions across all 4 product lines. Get registered, vote for the sessions you want, because this is about you, the attendee, voting for the sessions. Let us know, both as speakers and conference organizers, what you're interested in. And with that, have a good weekend.